As we search for information, we must do more than simply collect sources. In the previous video, we discussed how we can think critically to identify and navigate bias, but that's just one facet of information evaluation. In order to effectively identify quality information sources, we must be able to employ a variety of techniques. There are many different information evaluation methods. Most of the methods you'll come across use an acronym to remind you of the techniques you'll need to employ to evaluate information. Some evaluation methods work better than others for specific source types. We'll look at 3 evaluation methods today: SIFT, TRAP, and SMART. Let's take a closer look. The SIFT method is particularly helpful when evaluating information from websites or social media posts. When performing the SIFT test, you will use a 4-step process in which you stop, investigate the source, find better coverage, and trace claims, quotes, and media to the original context. Let's take it step by step. First, we stop. This step asks us to pause before we share information that we encounter online or via social media. Do you know and trust the source of the information? If not, you should definitely follow the rest of the steps before further engaging with the information. Next, we'll investigate by doing some digging about the source or author. What is their reputation? Based on their profile, do they seem to be an expert in the field? You can even use online sources like Wikipedia to look up organizations and determine their legitimacy and purpose. Once you've found some more information about your source, you'll want to find better coverage of your information. If the information you've encountered is true, there should be more than one source discussing it. Use other reputable sources like newspapers or known experts to verify the information. But be careful when using Google and make sure you are always using trusted sources. Finally, the information source you encountered may make claims, use media, or attribute quotes from other sources, but you shouldn't just take their word for it. Find the original sources they reference, check dates, and verify whether the information accurately reflects the original context. Sometimes social media posts or websites can be deceptive in the way they frame information from other sources. Our next evaluation method is known as the TRAP test. This is another method that can be used for online sources and may even be useful for assessing whether a scholarly source is right for your research. In this method, you'll use the following criteria to determine whether a source is a trap. First, timeliness. This refers to how current the information is. This may or may not be relevant to you depending on your topic. If your research requires up-to-date sources, you may want to ask yourself, when was this information published? Has it been updated? If the article contains links to other sources, do they work? And is there a newer source that has been published on this topic? One of the most important factors to consider when evaluating a source is its relevance. Even if a source contains reliable information, it may not be the best fit for your needs. Ask yourself, does this information relate to my topic? Am I able to easily comprehend the information? Is it too advanced or specialized? Is this the best source to use, or are there better options? Authority is a type of influence that is recognized or exerted within a community. In this context, we must determine who created the information and what kind of authority they have to do so. Ask yourself, who is the author or creator? Are they qualified to write about this topic? And do they have affiliations with people or organizations that might cause them to be biased about the topic? The second A in our acronym is accuracy. To assess the accuracy of information, you will need to seek out other sources to see what they have to say about your topic. Ask yourself, where does this information come from? Has it been peer-reviewed? Does this information match what other sources are reporting? And are there errors in the source, such as spelling or grammar? Finally, we have purpose. All information is produced for a reason, and knowing what that reason is can help us in the evaluation process. Ask yourself, what is the purpose of this information? To educate, persuade, entertain, or sell? Are the intentions of the author or creator clear? And does the information seem to be objective, or do there seem to be biases present? The last method we'll look at is called the SMART check. This method is particularly helpful when evaluating news stories. Newspapers and news websites are generally a good source of information, but their quality can vary based on partisan affiliation and bias. You'll use the following criteria to assess news sources with SMART. The first thing you'll need to identify when evaluating a news story is its source. Ask yourself the following: where is the story coming from? Is it a known and reputable news outlet? And is it difficult to determine where it's from? If so, be wary. Next, you'll identify motive. Every news story is published for a reason. A news outlet's interests or affiliations may have an effect on the way they report a story. You can ask yourself, are they only getting one side of the story? Or does the author or news outlet have biases that may skew the way they present information? Once again, we must identify who's writing the individual story and whether they're a reliable source of information. Ask yourself, what are the author's credentials? Do they tend to write articles on this topic, or is this a departure? Are they an eyewitness to the event, or are they interviewing eyewitnesses? Are they referencing other sources, or merely reproducing rumors? Sometimes it's possible to tell whether a story is off just by reading it. Carefully review the article and ask yourself, does the story make sense? Is it logically consistent? Are there any obvious errors? Do any of the facts seem questionable? Make a list of them so you can check their validity elsewhere. Your last step is called the two-source test. In this step, you'll find another source discussing the same topic and compare. Ask yourself, are there other news outlets reporting the same story? Are they presenting the story in the same way, or do they contradict your original source? And do you need to consult further sources? The SMART check is a great start, but there are some other important factors to keep in mind when interacting with news sources. When you engage with news sources, in addition to basic reporting, there are other types of articles you may come across, such as opinion pieces or persuasive writing. Opinion pieces express a particular point of view on a topic, while persuasive writing has the purpose of convincing readers of the validity of a point of view. Even though this kind of writing expresses opinions, those opinions should be supported by evidence. When you encounter persuasive or opinion-based writing, you should engage with it the same way you would with any other source, with an attitude of informed skepticism. Ask yourself what the source is trying to convince you of, why the author or creator expresses this opinion, and whether the information they cite from the original sources is taken out of context to fit their opinion. You may have noticed that many of the techniques employed by these different evaluation methods are quite similar. No matter what kind of information source you're evaluating, there are certain things that you will consistently want to watch out for, such as how reputable a source is or whether they have their facts straight. In the next video, we'll go into more depth about how information evaluation can help us avoid spreading misinformation and learn more about fact-checking. Want some help? Schedule a research appointment with one of our librarians today.